Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trailokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Twameva Mata Chapita, Twameva, Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Twameva. Twameva Vedya Dravidam, Twameva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So this evening we start the 8th chapter, the lamp of Kutastha. So let's review two technical terms. We've had them before, and we'll go over their meaning, which we've done before. So first we have the term Kutastha. Kuta can be an anvil, and we use that imagery because the anvil stays always the same, and the blacksmith then takes other metals like steel for the sword or iron for the horseshoes or copper or anything like that. If he's a cooper and he's going to make hoops for a barrel, they all change. But the anvil is sthita, comes from the root sta tishtati, which means to stand or be still or be established. The other meaning of kuta is a mountain. The idea is the mountain is solid and immovable, and the weather changes on top of the mountain, but the mountain just is. It too is established and still. So he uses this word kutastha to refer to the self, which is achalam. It never moves. And we have this other term, chid abhasa. Chid, of course, is awareness or consciousness. Abhasa means a reflection. So it's the reflection of consciousness. And he comes up with an absolutely fascinating image. Never seen this in any other scripture before. So you have to imagine that there's 6 of us outside on a sunny day, and we're near a wall, which is white. It's a stone wall that's been whitewashed. And each of us has a small mirror. Now, if we just look at the wall, the sun is illuminating the wall. But if the six of us take our mirrors and catch the reflection of the sun and shine it on the wall, you'll see six bright spots on that wall. Do you grasp the image? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes. So he's going to talk about this double consciousness. We have the self which illumines everything. Then the reflection of consciousness, which then limited illumines the world of name and form and the absence of things. So even Mahatmas know and don't know. I remember overhearing a conversation that a disciple had with Swamiji. And he was being very, very personal about some issues he was having with his wife. And his wife, I won't go into the particulars, but she wasn't, they weren't having sex, I might as well say it. She had decided not to have sex anymore. And he was concerned about it. He had a difficult time. So the wife was probably saying, I'm a sadhu now and I don't need all that sort of stuff. And Swamiji, and he was very close to this couple, he says, I did not know this. What she's doing is wrong. She has a duty to do if she's married as a wife. But what struck me, Swamiji knew lots of things, but Swamiji did not know what was happening with this couple. So you've seen me do this all the time. Are you aware of the phone in my hand? You have knowledge of the phone in my hand. Do you know there is no phone in my hand? Yes. So the self illumines knowledge in the intellect, and the self illumines the lack of knowledge in the intellect. So when this chidavasa, this reflection of consciousness caught in the web of thought, as Swamiji used to say, feels like I, Jim, know this world. I see the couch. I see Nilang over there. Is that the self illuminating it? Well, it's kind of the self illuminating this chidabhasa, which then illuminates the couch and Nilang. The sun is illuminating the wall, but the sun shines on the mirror. The mirror then creates an extra bright spot. Very, very interesting image. Now, as we get into it, the objector's going to raise some objections. Is Chidabhasa this reflection of consciousness in the intellect, or does it illumine the intellect? Do we have self, Chidabhasa, intellect, or is it self, intellect, and Chidabhasa's in the intellect? Interesting question. If we go back and look at Shankara, when he has this discussion of the Panchakosha, the five sheaths, he says in the Vijnanamaya Kosha, there is this Karta, this agent, which is the Chidavasa. Other scriptures will peel those two away. And then Vidyaranya would say, when you're thirsty and you get a drink of water, do you really care if it's a wooden bowl or a metal one? Don't worry about it. All right. So these are interesting things. The idea is to try to understand this relationless relationship between what I experience as an individual, consciousness, awareness, chaitanya, chitta, and the absolute. So, with this in mind, let's get into the chapter 8, verse 1.
Khaditya Dipito Kudye Darpanaditya Diptivaha Kutastha Bhasito Deho Dhista Jivena Bhasyate. Just as a wall illumined by the rays of the sun is more illumined when the light of the sun reflected in a mirror falls on it, so the body illumined by Kutastha is more illumined by the light of Kutastha reflected in the intellect Chidabhasa.
Now, so what happens is I, Jim, am aware of the itch on the back of my hand. I, Jim, am aware of my glasses on my face, the sensations in the body. So it is enlivened and illumined by Kutastha, but then there is another kind of illumination. Let me see if I can give it as an example. Puneet, do you know if my knees hurt?
No.
You see what that is? With the stars everywhere. I know if my knees hurt a little bit, but that's an individual luminosity, which you do not share, which you do not share. Now, all of us look at the couch. That's like all six of these fellows with their mirrors shining the light on the wall. So we have this ultimate reality, chit strikes the chid abhasa, which then illumines from an individual perspective the world of name and form. This answers the question, well, if the self is omniscient, all-knowing, when I realized, how come I don't know everything? Well, the self is omniscient. Do you know what you had for lunch today?
Mm-hmm.
I know what I had for lunch today. Do you know what you had for lunch today?
Yes.
It is the self illuminating Chidabhasa in you, me, and you, illuminating what each one of us had for lunch today. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, going on.
Aneka Darpanaditya Diptinam Bahusandhishu Itara Vyajate Tasa Bhavepi Prakashate. When many mirrors reflect the light of the sun onto a wall which is already illumined by the sun, Spaces between the various reflections are illumined by the light of the sun alone. And even if the reflections are not there, the wall still remains illumined.
Yes. So we have this idea, well, the universe exists because consciousness is knowing it. Well, does that mean if all the conscious beings in the universe died, would the universe disappear? No, because Brahman is still knowing it. If you go to sleep at night, your wife, your girlfriend does not disappear. It disappears from your perception. She does not disappear. So, kutastha, consciousness, is vijnana ganam, a homogeneous mass of sat existence, bhava being, chit awareness, and it pervades everything. But in this dream-like Maya are these chid abhasa characters, individually illuminating with a little bright spot various names and forms according to the equipment they have. I always like to compare people to sharks. Sharks have these little pits on their noses. I always forget what they're called. But sharks have a sense such that they can sense the electrical impulses in the nervous systems of fish and crustacea. So probably the greatest example of this is the hammerhead shark. So it has this head that looks like a vacuum cleaner with its eyes on the end. All along that head are these little bits. And they go along the ocean bottom. And they can sense the crabs buried in the sand. They go get them. We don't have that sense. We cannot know the world with that particular mirror. Or elephants. Elephants can hear subsonic vibrations that humans can't. Same thing with whales. Whales make sounds that are louder than jet engines, but we can't hear them. They make higher sounds too, which we can hear. So we have a very limited ability to reflect. Eagles, various raptors, their sense of sight is so much more acute. They see in the infrared and the ultraviolet, but we can't see. Amazing what nature can do. So we have Kutastha striking this Chitabhasa, this mirror-like phenomenon, which then enlivens the senses, that illumines a world of name and form. Now, when the chitta is folded up, the stuff of mind is folded up into deep sleep, no chitabhasa, no world. But Chitakasha, the space of awareness, the kudastha, is still there. Same thing in samadhi. When the mind goes into samadhi, when the thoughting ceases, all phenomena disappears. Only kudastha remains. All right, next verse.
चिदाभास विशिष्टानां तथानेकधियामसौ सन्धिं धियामभावं च भास्यन् प्रविच्य तां भासं यन्त् प्रविविच्यताम्. Similarly, both in the intervals between the modifications of the intellect vrittis, in which Chidabhasa is reflected, and during their absence in deep sleep, Kutastha abides self-illumined, and Kutastha is therefore to be known as different from Chidabhasa.
Yes. So, this reflection of consciousness caught in the web of thought, the individual knower of the world, is different than the Supreme Self. Kinda. I am fond of the imagery that Gaudapada uses in the 4th chapter of his Karika in Mandukya, the Alata Shanti. So I updated the circle in the sparkler on the 4th of July or Diwali. So if you take the sparkler, it has a glowing tip, and at night you can make a circle. Now, this is like the vrittis, the movement of mind, the flow of thought. So, unlike the circle in the sparkler, when the flow of thought begins, Chidabhasa comes into apparent existence, as does the body and the senses that perceive the world. It's as if you were to move the sparkler and the whole perceivable world showed up. But like the circle in the sparkler, when you stop moving the sparkler, the circle disappears. Stop the mind and you stop the world. And you also stop Chidabhasa. Now, the Yaranya doesn't talk about this, but other scriptures do. In Yoga Vasishta, we get the term Tanu Manasa, thinness of mind. In actuality, for many of us, the actual stopping of the mind is not essential. Just thinning it to the point that when I introvert that attentive faculty and endeavor to notice the knower, there's no individual there. It's just the space of pure awareness. And when the thoughting starts up again, and you're involved in what we call vyavahara, doing business, transactions in the world. Then that chitabhasa reforms to do the interactions with the world. I went up to Piedmont Avenue. I had an omelet for lunch today. But that comes and goes, rises and falls. And I see it. I see it exist. I see when it doesn't exist. So it can't be me. The sun shines on the wall. The sun shines on the mirror and creates a reflection that makes a bright spot on the wall. But the sun illumines the mirror, whether it's shining on the wall. All right, next verse.
घटकाकारधीस्था चेत् घटमेवावभासते घटस्य ज्ञातता ब्रह्म चैतन्ये नावभासते. An external object such as a pot is cognized through the vrittis, modifications of the intellect, assuming its form, but the knowledge, I know the pot, comes directly through pure consciousness, Brahman.
So we have two things happening here. The first, I see a pot. Brahman illumines the intellect, the mind. Chitabhasa illumines with vrittis the pot. Direct perception. Then I have a thought. Oh, I see a pot. That's illumined by Chidakasha, your awareness. I see the I thought. So the point that he's getting at, this Chidabhasa, shows up as thoughts of I-ness and minus. And that is illumined by pure awareness. So think the thought, I see a pot. Now think the thought, I don't see a pot. You illumined both. Which is why I prefer to use the language of Jiva Bhavana. You've heard me say this many times. Jiva Bhavana, Bhavana means an attitude or a feeling. So it's the feeling that I am a person. So this I, to whom I refer linguistically, I got on the bus today. I actually got on the wrong bus today and had to get off and get on the right bus today. I had lunch with a friend, my friend Dan. That I that went hither and thither. Body did all the movement, but the sense of I is this Chidabhasa, which is illumined by the self. Comes and goes, it rises and falls. It thickens when I get triggered. It thins when I am practicing renunciation. It disappears in deep sleep. It disappears in samadhi. Something there is. which is Baba, being, which is I, which is other than this Chid Abhasa. Now, we see a mirror. So the sun goes down and it's dark. There I am with the wall. There's maybe a little starlight, not much moon. Damn mirror won't work at night. Doesn't illumine the damn wall. Is there something wrong with my mirror? Why won't it illumine the wall at night?
Not enough light.
There's no sun up in the sky. So the Chid Abhasa is absolutely dependent upon the light of the self. It has no sentience of its own. It's like the mirror doesn't have any inherent light. It's not like a flashlight or a torch, as they say in India. It is Jada. It's inert. All right, next verse.
Jim, I have a question.
Yes.
When he's saying an external object such as a pot is cognized through the vrittis, right?
Yes.
But there's a difference between perception and thought about the perception, right? So one is just I cognize the pot, but there's no real like verbal like words about it.
Well, that's another layer beyond what he's talking about. You're absolutely right. Oh, that's a pretty pot. I like the design of the pot. It reminds me of the pot my mother had. That's another layer. You're absolutely right.
But even like for example, if you're like concentrating on the pot, at one point the difference between the pot and you might just disappear, right? So it's just and in that case, like wouldn't so he's saying, the knowledge that I know the pot, that is Brahman, the second kind of knowledge. But in this case, seems like the first one.
No. The knowledge I know the pot is illumined by Brahman directly.
Yeah. But is that also not the case for this? Because if I'm merged, essentially merged with the pot, it's essentially the
That's
same.
That's called Savikalpa Samadhi. Yes, of course.
Okay.
Chidabhasa is thinning to a tremendous degree.
Okay.
So this Chidabhasa is not like a solid, still thing like a mirror is. You got to think of it as an amoeba mirror. It morphs depending on the frequency and the volume of the vrittis. Isn't that your direct experience?
Yeah.
And in fact, you can take a pot and you can just tune up and stare at it and just you disappear and you're not even conscious of it as a form. It's just color. Infants are in that state. They don't know it's a pot. Again, don't get hung up on Vidyaranya's metaphors and images. Go to your direct experience. What he's endeavoring to do is communicate to those in ignorance or those with tenuous understanding the truth using a metaphor. Always the metaphors fall short.
Got it.
Is that useful?
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Okay. And that's for all of us, not just Ganesh. And remember the Buddha. I call him Sid. Siddhartha. He did not get instruction from a Vidyaranya. He just sat under the damn tree and kept emptying out. And then he saw what was true. In the end, that's what we all must do. All right, next verse.
अज्ञातत्वेन भातोऽयं घटो बुद्ध्युद्ध यात्पुरा ब्रह्मणैवोपरिष्टात्तु ज्ञातत्वेनेत्यसौभिदा. Before the rise of the vritti, that is, before the intellectual operation, my experience was, I do not know that there is a pot over there. After the rise, the experience is, I know that there is a pot over there. This is the difference the intellectual operation or vritti brings about. But both the above experiences of knowledge or non-knowledge of the pot are due to Brahman.
Yes. So this is what I was saying in my introductory comments. Brahman illumines the intellect when it knows and the intellect when it does not know. So this is why Yoga Vasishtha will say both bondage and liberation occur to the mind, technically to this Chidavasa. The self is ever free. So let's say that you or a friend, I were to say, are you realized? Do you know the self? You say, oh no, Jim, I'm deep in ignorance. I'm just a miserable creature. I'm so sorry. What's your life like? Oh, such suffering, Jim. You have no idea. My boss does this. My family does that. And my spouse. Oh, my spouse. And what I would then say is, oh, so you know the misery. Oh, do I know the misery? Do you know if your brother or sister is miserable? No, no, no. I do not know if they're miserable. At least until they called me today. Then they told me about their misery. Now I know their misery. So the self is illuminating spiritual ignorance. In that Chidabhasa is the vritti, I do not know my essential nature. The self is illuminating the vritti in the Chidabhasa. I have a miserable life. The self is illuminating the vritti. I don't know about my sister. Then she called. Now I'm illuminating the vritti. Oh, my sister's having a terrible time. So Yoga Vasishtha reduces it. There's no other bondage than the vritti of ignorance, of Arana Shakti, and the subsequent Vikshepa Shakti. I'm my body. I'm a person. And there's no other moksha, no other liberation than the deeply rooted conviction in the intellect that's gained through direct experience. What's that direct experience? Stop the mind, or at least thin the mind. The attentive faculty turned within. These are all things that are happening in the mind. And then what does the mind see? There's no person there. Oh my golly gosh. I thought I was a person. Where did he go? It disappeared. And that insight, that pratyabhignana, occurs to the Chidabhasa. And neither state, spiritual ignorance or knowledge, changes or touches the self. Now, these insights that are happening in the Chidabhasa, I'm a miserable creature, I'm all bound up in ignorance. Someday I hope to gain moksha. Or, oh, what was the beautiful poetry we had last week? Danyoham? Lesson up, say it again.
Dhanyoham.
Short A? The long A.
Short A.
Danyoham. Danyoham. Blessed am I. Oh, I've been freed from my stupidity. Blessed am I. I now know that I am Brahman. It is the Chidabhasa that's having that insight. Now, there is a difference between paroksha jnanam, indirect knowledge, Brahman is, the self is, and direct knowledge, aparoksha jnana. Oh, I am that Chidakash, Chidananda, Kutastha. It's my very nature. All right, next verse. This is really wonderfully gnarly. I love it.
चिदाभासान्तधीवृत्ति ज्ञानं मोहान्तकुन्तवत् जाड्यं ज्ञानम् एताभ्यां व्याप्तकुम्भो विधोच्यते. Cognition or knowledge of external thing is the action thereon of the intellectual modification tipped with Chidabhasa like the steel head of a spear. And the non-cognition is the beginningless but not endless dullness of an external thing covering its revelation. Thus, an external thing is spoken of in two ways, as a thing part known or unknown, as the intellectual modification spearheaded by Chidabhasa pierces its cover of dullness or not.
So when there is the non-apprehension of some phenomenal thing, the pot is buried in a pile of straw. Then what do I need to do? Get out the pitchfork or my hands and uncover the pot. There's the pot. So he says that inquiry into the things of the world, being able to determine the suchness, the thatness of stuff, it's like a spear that points, that cuts through. But when I do not know, it's like dullness, it's like covering, like the pot covered up with straw or dirt or something. Next one.
But you could say the work that needs to be done is not literally any action of maybe removing the straw, It's more of a perception, right? Which is not really action as such. It's
Well, these are metaphors.
right.
And what he's talking about, what is that which obscures the self? It is the compulsive extroversion of the mind because of its attachment and identification. This is why you hear me say self-realization is not difficult. Krishna says easy to perform, but it's rare. It's rare because nobody wants it. The flip side of that is I really want the world. And my desire for the world creates obfuscating vrittis. If you ask a colleague at work or a social friend, and you say, tell me about yourself, what are they going to answer? You tell me, what will they probably answer?
Stuff about their personality, maybe.
Well, my job, my family, my relationship, my health, history. Are you ever going to have a friend? Well, tell me about yourself. Oh, I'm birthless and changeless reality. Has any of you ever had that happen at a cocktail party? Of course not. So it's that, and I can't remember which Upanishad it is. It might be Cana, where it says, the Lord created the senses with outgoing tendencies. And here we mean the mind. That's how we're built. We're built to cognize stuff. And because of that, nobody, without help of the scriptures or a teacher, ever thinks to think about, who am I? Or if they do, they go to the psychotherapist. You say, tell me who you are. And they talk about their psychology. They talk about the subtle body. And then you say to them, oh, look within and see what you see. I looked within. I see darkness and depression. Ah! I'm still triggered from my childhood abuse. They can't look beyond the obscuring elements. So this is the value of meditation. It's meditation in action. Is it?
I suppose it is.
Yeah. But it's an action that removes stuff. That's its intent.
So I suppose it's an action of non-action.
Well, in the beginning, there's quite a bit of action. Pay attention to your breath, scan your body, chant your mantra. Don't react to what arises. I wouldn't get too hung up on it. And again, this is just Vidyaranya's frame. It's an interesting one. He's considered a great Vedanta. But as I said to Ganesh, keep it simple. Go to your direct experience. This use of metaphors at some level becomes problematic. Well, maybe I haven't got the right thing. It just creates more doubt. In a quiet mind, with the attentive faculty turned within, who are you? What is your essential nature? All right, next verse.
अज्ञातो ब्रह्मणा भास्यो ज्ञातकुम्भस्तथा न किम् ज्ञातत्वजननेनैव चिदाभासपरिक्षयः. If the cognition of an unknown part can be had through Brahman, why not that of a known part? It does produce the cognition, for the Chidabhasa ceases functioning as soon as the part is made known.
So I quit the deliberation, the vimarsha, as soon as the pot is known. What is that over there? Is it a milk jug? Is it a water jar? Oh, it's a pot. Then that deliberation ceases. It's a pot. So the metaphor that I have used frequently, if you're out at Ocean Beach, you're sitting on the beach, and I look out into the sea, I see something white. Direct perception. I do not know what it is. So Brahman is illuminating the Chidabhasa, illuminating ignorance in the intellect. I do not know. So I look at it, I examine it. Is it a buoy? Is it a ship? Is it a sailboat? Finally, as it comes closer, I see, oh, yes. It's a sloop. Looks like it's about a 32-foot sloop. Oh, what a beautiful boat. Then the mind comes in. It's a beautiful boat. God, I'd love to go sailing. It's been so long since I've been sailing. History, story, joy, etc. So that's my particular model. A little bit different than his. But it's the Chidabhasa that's illuminating those various functions in the inner equipment. A person sitting next to me on the beach is reading a book. They're not having the same experience of the white object of the sun. Then Brahman is illuminating Chidabhasa, which is illuminating the senses, seeing words, and then the intellect discerns what those words mean. Look to your own direct experience. That's, again, what I invite us all to do. All right. Any other questions about this process? Do we need to poke that little blue box at the bottom? I don't know. I don't even know what it does.
It said the meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Next one.
आभासहीनया बुद्ध्या ज्ञातत्वं नैव जन्यते तादृक् बुद्धे विशेषको मृदादे स्याद्विकारिणः. If the intellect is without Chidabhasa, the cognition of an object cannot take place. For how does intellect in such a case differ from a lump of clay which is unconscious and insentient?
So, if the intellect is without the reflection of consciousness, then no knowledge takes place, is what he's saying. I'm trying to think if there's a worldly experience of that.
Deep sleep feel, exactly.
I don't know. Let's see if he modifies that. I think that's theoretically, I get it, but I'm not sure there's a direct experience that corresponds. Going on.
Jnata ityachyate kumbho mridalipto na kutrichit धीमात्र व्याप्त कुंभस्य ज्ञातत्वं नेष्यते तथा. Nowhere is a pot said to be known when it is besmeared with clay. Similarly, when a pot is besmeared or covered by a vritti only, not along with Chidabhasa, it cannot be said to be known, for both the clay and the vritti are themselves unconscious and insentient.
So I think the idea here is the clay doesn't know the pot. It's inert. So the intellect itself is inert. It needs the luminosity of the Chidabhasa in order to function. I know an example of it, a blackout drinker. I don't know if you've ever drunk so much you've been in a blackout. Have you? Something in the psyche shuts off. The body is functioning, you're speaking, intellect is functioning, you're telling the bartender that he's a rotten so-and-so. Then you get thrown out of the bar. And then you come out of the blackout. Chidabhasa, there's to illumine the intellect that was functioning without it. Or maybe sleepwalking. I've ever been a somnambulist. Somnambulist. That's as close as I could come. But theoretically, the point he's driving at is the bodies, the equipment, however you break it down, is jada. It's inert. So I think a simpler metaphor, if it's nighttime, my mirror cannot make a bright spot on the wall. It has no power to illumine. It has to borrow the light of the sun. So also the body, mind, intellect, and Chidabhasa itself is fundamentally jada. It has no bhava, no being. Only you do. All right, next one.
ज्ञातत्वं नाम कुम्भेत चिदाभास फलोदयः न फलं ब्रह्म चैतन्यं मानात् प्रागपि सत्वतः. Hence, cognition of a pot is that reflection of consciousness on the pot which is produced as a result of the enveloping operation of the vritti kam chidabhasa. Brahman or pure consciousness cannot be this resultant reflection of consciousness inasmuch as it, being the eternal and immutable existence, exists prior to cognition.
So the underlying argument that he's pushing back against is the self is the transmigrating soul, which many Hindus believe in based on scripture. It is a frame that you find in Gita in the second chapter and parts of it, in the Karmakanda section of the Vedas. If you come to the Vedanta having studied Yoga Sutra with the Vyasa commentary, when we were reading Pandit Rajmani, he talked about the individual Purushas. Remember that?
Mhm.
And there's a big Purusha called Ishvara. What is that individual Purusha? It's a little lump of consciousness that goes through a process. It's all entangled up with matter, and we got to beat up the nasty old matter to get the nice Purusha out so we can go home to Brahman. No, no. This Chidabhasa, the sense that I'm an individual, it's called Jiva, it's called Jivatman. And I like Jiva Bhavana. This is why the Buddha said there is no self, because the idea that he was railing against is this belief in Hindu religion that there's an individual self that undergoes change, that acquires punya and papa. And if you're not careful, you're going to come back as a lizard. Or if you really do a good job, you'll be born in a higher caste. All based on the idea that there's a sentient thing called an individual me. Here Vidyaranya is saying it feels that way. And again, I'm a great fan of Gaudapada. He then essentially asks the question, well, do you incarnate into a dream? Are you in the dream, or is the dream in you? And is the dream real? So this feeling that I am a person, this world that I'm perceiving with its joys and sorrows, successes and failures, it's just a very long, very vivid dream. Just like the vicissitudes of the dreamer do not affect the waker. Nothing in this world of name and form, in Punya Loka, Swarga, or Papaloka, Naraka, none of that ever touches the self. All right, next one.
परागर्थ प्रमेयेषु या फलत्वेन सम्मता संवित् सैवैहमायोर्थो वेदान्तोक्ति प्रमाणतः. But will it not go against Sureshwaracharya's opinion expressed in the following Vartika?
Is this an objection?
Yes. According to the authoritative books on Vedanta, an object of cognition in matters of external objects is that samvit or consciousness which is the result of the act of cognition.
Read that again. I'm not sure I understood it.
According to the authoritative books on Vedanta, an object of cognition in matters of external objects is that samvit or consciousness which is the result of the act of cognition.
So what I think that scriptural passage or that commentator says is, again, it's this Chidabhasa. that cognizes the individual world. Now, you can also look at it this way. The self, in the end, is the simple awareness of the most ordinary waking state. Because only the self is sentient. It only appears limited because it's peeping through various upadhis. Again, I like to use the example, if you just are in this room, you have wide peripheral vision. If you make a tube with your hands and look through the tube, your vision is obscured, it's limited, but nothing has happened to your eyeball. It has not undergone a change. It's just peeping through a limited hole. Remove your hands and your peripheral vision returns. Nothing happened to your eyeball. The self peeping through this Chidabhasa. Whether the Chidabhasa is in the intellect or the Chidabhasa illumines the intellect, I'm not too concerned about that. All of these are just upadhis, conditionings. But the experience is, it feels like I am a person who experiences X, Y, and Z. Nilang is another person who experiences A, B, and C. But when any of us slow down, see if we can see the space between the thoughts, then that Chidabhasa starts to have holes in it, spaces in it. Introvert the attentive faculty. Where is this attentive faculty? In the subtle intellect or in Chidabhasa. Doesn't matter where you want to locate it. Makes no sense, no difference. What do you see? The equipment I illumine and the world I illumine is different than yours and yours. But when any of us look within, only pure awareness is there. Only. All right. I think this is a good place to stop. What verse are we on for next week?
13.
13. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.